The sacred beasts are the spiritual successors to the Egyptian gods, and I want to preface this video by saying that even though they've never been competitively successful, they definitely are way better than the Egyptian gods. Their support is a lot better, their design is a lot better, and they've seen a lot more competitive experimentation compared to the god cards. I mean, if we look at the support that the god cards got, such as Ra's disciple, something that really had an idea of how to get the god cards to be decent, but didn't really have a good execution, and we compare that to the card like Paradise Lost, which is really good at actually helping people play the Sacred Beast cards in a sort of casual setting without just bricking every game, we can really see that Konami eventually realized how to make these cards a little better. And in today's video, we're going to talk about why, even though the Sacred Beasts are better than the Egyptian gods, they still never saw a huge amount of competitive play. We are going to take a look though, and I'm going to make sure to really note where the different design philosophies lie in these two sets of cards, because the Sacred Beasts were designed to fix many of the issues that I complained about with the Egyptian gods in the last video. The first Sacred Beast that I want to take a look at is URIA, Lord of Searing Flames. Now I know that with all of these cards there's like a lot of different ways to pronounce them. Some people say URIA is pronounced URIA. I don't really care how they're pronounced, I've just always pronounced it URIA, so that's what we're going to stick with. And I want to show you what these cards do well and what they don't do well, because the natural progression of things should tell you that these cards should just always be an improvement from the Egyptian gods. If they simply looked at the flaws from the Egyptian gods and then got rid of those flaws, suddenly you would have good cards. And in some ways, not always, these cards actually have improved on the god card formula. However, they lose some of the benefits from the Egyptian gods, and that kind of makes them not quite as good in some ways, but better in other. It just leaves them in a really confusing sort of middle ground. So anyway, what is the good part about this card? Well, the good part is that they finally have gotten rid of the normal summoning part of the Egyptian gods. You can special summon these things, and they all have this sort of special summoning themselves by sending 3 face-up cards you control to the graveyard. In Uriah's case, it's 3 face-up trap cards, and also it can't be special summoned in other ways. That kind of sucks. It doesn't have like the blow up effect of Obelisk and Slifer, but you can't Monster Reborn or Call the Haunted this thing, nothing like that. Once you get it on the field, it's on the field for good until your opponent gets rid of it, and then you can't bring it back. But anyway, this thing gains 1,000 attack for each continuous trap card in your graveyard. That's awesome. It'll usually come out at 3,000 attack, and then it can suddenly go to like 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000, depending on the type of deck you're playing. I know personally, I've played this card in a deck that was using That Grass Looks Greener to get it up to ridiculous amounts of attack, but that's neither here nor there, and that's really not like the most conventional way that people were playing this card. Anyway, the other thing I like about this card is it has a Night Beam effect, so it can destroy back row, stuff can't be chained to it. That's really cool, because one of the biggest complaints I had about the Egyptian gods is that none of them really gain advantage. A lot of them, I mean, they're clunky to summon, they take a lot of card economy to summon, and then they don't really give you anything for the work that you put in to actually bring them out. Uriah actually destroys back row, so over time you can slowly sort of gain back the 3 cards that you had to tribute to actually summon this thing by destroying cards that your opponent controls. So after 3 turns or so, you can actually be at a 3-for-3 trade, but you have a Uriah and they don't, which is kind of neat. Now, what is this card missing? It's missing all forms of protection. This card has 0 forms of protection. The god cards not only have the normal summon protection. When they're normal summon, cards and effects can't be activated, so they can't be hit by like Bottomless Trap Pull. Obelisk comes with the targeting protection, which is really cool. And yeah, this card doesn't have that, and none of the god cards, or none of the Sacred Beasts, I should say, have that protection, which is a pretty big letdown. They're basically just bigger, regular monsters, which isn't quite good enough, I have to say. The next Sacred Beast that I want to take a look at is HAMON, Lord of Striking Thunder. This carries over many of the good parts of Uriah, although it loses out on my favorite part from Uriah, which we'll talk about in a second. So anyway, instead of sending 3 face-up trap cards to the graveyard, this card sends 3 face-up continuous spell cards, which is kind of neat because it means you can summon it a lot faster. With Uriah, you had to set 3 trap cards, they had to be flipped during the next turn, they had to survive that turn, and then you had to send them to the graveyard. With HAMON, technically technically you could just activate 3 continuous spell cards and then summon it immediately. This card also comes out at a really strong base 4,000 attack and defense, which is cool. It doesn't have to have certain cards in the graveyard to sort of gain attack and defense. It just comes out at a big number. I will say the major downside of this card, besides the fact that it once again doesn't have any protection effects, so it's basically just a big monster, both of the bonus effects on this card pretty much don't matter. One is a very mediocre burn effect, and the other is sort of a lightning rod effect. Neither of those effects have any impact on the game, and it's really disappointing. I would have liked to see Hamon have like an effect that blows up face up spells or traps that would go right along with Uria's effect, and I think that'd be pretty cool. However, it doesn't have that effect, which makes it pretty lackluster. It's sort of just a lukewarm monster. It has those big stats that a lot of people like, and it has a cool summoning effect, but outside of that, it's basically just a 4,000 attack normal monster, which isn't quite good enough to warrant the 3 tributes. The third and final Sacred Beast monster is RAVIEL, Lord of Phantasms, and it's pretty much the worst of the bunch. I know it's sort of like the figurehead of the Sacred Beast, but it absolutely is the least useful. So anyway, this card has to tribute 3 Fiend-type monsters, not spells or traps or anything along those lines, and that really limits what you can play this in. I'm sure there are lots of Fiend-type monsters that can be spammed on the board, but the fact that you have to play this in an all-Fiend-type deck is kind of disappointing, and by far makes it the hardest to summon of the 3 Sacred Beasts. And then its effect is pretty lackluster, so if your opponent normal summons a monster, you get a token, and then once per turn you can tribute a monster to have this guy gain the attack of the tributed monster. Those effects are really low impact. They don't really accomplish anything. They never really have. I think that the best way to make this card better would be to give the attack bonus just permanently. That'd be pretty cool. Then you could sort of load up a whole bunch of attack points, and then maybe you could OTK your opponent. In general though, both those effects are pretty bad, and this is the hardest one to summon, which is why it's seen the least play of the 3 in terms of experimentation. Uriah has seen the most play, Hamon has seen a little bit less, but about the same, where RAVIEL has pretty much never been tried out in any deck competitively or in Rogue or even really in casual. Unlike the Egyptian God video, I actually really want to focus on the support that came out for the Sacred Beast, only because it's really good in context of this strategy. Compared to like Ra's Disciple, which is such a half-hearted attempt at giving the Egyptian gods some form of playability, the Sacred Beast support is actually really good. So I like that a lot. So Dark Summoning Beast is a level 5 Fiend monster. It's essentially a lone Fire Blossom for any of the Sacred Beasts. That's really cool. They can't attack that turn. I think that's not that big of drawback considering how much card advantage you're saving yourself by summoning them from the deck instead of just tributing that for them. So yeah, this card's awesome, and then also it has a secondary effect that lets you banish it in the graveyard to add one to your hand. I don't think that's super useful. It is kind of cool. The only deck that I played this card in when the first came out, I played it in this crazy Uriah deck, and the cool thing about the adding effect is that you can summon the first Uriah from the deck using the tributing effect, and then when it's in the graveyard, you can then banish it to add a second Uriah, and then you can special summon the second Uriah through its normal means, which then increases the attack of the first one that you summon. It's a pretty fringe application, but this card definitely is very powerful, if only for the Lone Fire Blossom effect. And then they have a really cool field spell called Fallen Paradise. This card's actually just incredible. So this makes all of the Sacred Beasts untargetable, as well as Armityle, the Chaos Phantom, which I'm not going to talk about in this video because it's terrible, but it's basically just a big fusion monster that you make by using all the Sacred Beast monsters. It's pretty bad though. But anyway, your opponent can't target any of these guys with card effects, and also they can't be destroyed by card effects, which is awesome. Basically, they gave all of the Sacred Beast monsters with this field spell better protection than Obelisk. It's basically the Chaos Max protection, which is great, and you can search this with terraforming. It's super awesome. And then also, if you control any of the Sacred Beast monsters, you get to draw 2 cards once per turn. This card is perfect legacy support. This card is better than Dark Summoning Beast for sure, because you don't have to summon anything, you don't have to brick it or whatever. Oh my god though, Fallen Paradise is such a cool card. I wish the Egyptian gods had support like this, because Fallen Paradise is just so awesome. It does everything you want out of a field spell that supports cards like Sacred Beast. It doesn't quite break the strategy, but it lets you have this huge benefit when you get them out on the field. The draw 2 effect sort of circumvents the huge drawback from actually summoning them. It at least gives you some of the cards back that you had to send to the graveyard to summon them in the first place. The non-targeting, non-destruction effect makes them kind of difficult to deal with. Of course, there's always going to be kaijus, and that definitely is a threat, but in your casual duels, that's not a huge issue. So they basically make all of these cards a better version of Obelisk the Tormentor, and also you get a free Pot of Greed every turn, except actually it's better than a Pot of Greed after the first turn, because the first time you're activating that, you have the one Fallen Paradise and you're drawing 2 cards, so that's kind of neat. But the second time you activate it, you've already gotten your sort of plus, so now you have like 4 draws for 1 card, which is just absolutely absurd. This card is really cool. If you want to play a Sacred Beast, you definitely want to play Fallen Paradise. I would say that not every version of Sacred Beast needs to play the Dark Summoning Beast. That's not super necessary, but Fallen Paradise is absolutely the best support card for these things. And when you compare these cards to Ra's Disciple, you can see why I wasn't that impressed with Ra's Disciple. I mean, yeah, I understand what they're trying to do, but it really doesn't help you play the Egyptian gods. It actually just isn't a very good card, and it's not something that you'd want to play in your god decks. You'd probably want to play something else to actually get them on the board. But in Sacred Beast decks, you definitely want to play Fallen Paradise, which shows that Konami does in fact sometimes know how to give legacy decks cool support. But anyway, that is going to wrap up my discussion on Sacred Beast. The main drawback from these things is that they have 0 protection, and that, yeah, they're going to brick sometimes, and also they are kind of tricky to special summon. So even with that dual saga support, they aren't quite powerful enough to make an impact, even as a rogue deck. But as a casual deck, I'd say you'd be much better off playing the Sacred Beasts than the Egyptian gods, just because the Sacred Beasts are a lot easier to summon, and Fallen Paradise is absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this discussion. I tried to highlight the ups and the downs of these cards, and you guys can kind of take a look at why they're better than the Egyptian gods, but still not quite competitive enough. I think at this point we can take a look at the, I don't even know what those other god cards are called, like the Wicked Eraser and that set of cards. We can take a look at those ones if you want me to. There seemed to be a lot of support for this video, so I thought I would go ahead and make it. But yeah, I will see you guys later. Bye.